You said during the election campaign that if you had lost the election, in fact, you'd resign from Parliament.
Yes.
Do we take it from that it's more important being the Prime Minister than it is being a constituent MP?
I actually think I said I'd resign. I don't remember saying it was from Parliament
Yeah,
altogether.
no, you did.
Perhaps it was.
Yeah.
My intent was to say as leader. My view is that certainly my view, that if you go through an election process and you're not successful in leading the team, then it's time to give someone else the job. I absolutely acknowledge when you're a constituency MP, you need to work those things through, though, and that's something that I hadn't quite worked all the way through.
Well, I'm pleased we've clarified that.
Yes, good to clarify.
You once said you had
Thankfully, it's a hypothetical, so...
You once said you had no interest in the job. What's changed?
Oh, well, actually, yes, and... my view coming into politics, and I've often said this, there aren't many workforces where someone joins a team, say you join Spark, where people straight off the bat say, do you want to be the CEO? I've always taken the view that I wanted to be a part of a team that achieved all of the ambitions that I had coming into politics. I never necessarily had the view that to achieve them, I needed to be in the top job. And so had I not been in this position, I would have very happily been a member of a team. Hopefully I would have been in cabinet. But for me, the primary point was never about my own personal ambition. And I stand by that.
You clearly like the job. I mean, how long do you see yourself staying in it?
I've always said to my friends and family around me, at any point where you think that actually it's time for someone else to take it on, tell me. It's often those around us that observe us in the role and see whether or not we've still got that energy and passion. That's obviously not now, but I'll continually keep a watch on whether or not I'm bringing that same energy to the role.
So if your colleagues did say to you that, Prime Minister, I think you should perhaps move along, would you?
I said family and friends, because you find family and friends are more likely to tell you politely. Colleagues just roll you. So, but, look, that's not essentially, I guess what you're asking is what's my plan around how long I'm in this role. I've never set down an endpoint. I've always focused on what I'm doing right now.
How difficult was it working with Winston Peters during the election campaign in particular? You can't say it wasn't difficult. Just how difficult was it?
Actually, during the election campaign proper, that's the point actually where it becomes very simple. You really pare back the difficult decisions you need to make. You're just keeping the machinery of government going. You each peel off and you have an expectation that you're going to...
So you took it on the chin?
Yeah, absolutely. I expected that would be the nature of the campaign. And so my view, and I stuck to it, was that actually we'd worked really well together. There was complexity, wasn't always easy, but by and large, actually, we did good things. I was proud of that, so I didn't want and never did run a campaign that was negative about anyone that was in our arrangement.
He said he'd never essentially worked with such a bunch of greenhorns. Do you believe you've improved over the past 3 years?
That assumes that I agree with that statement.
Exactly.
And I do not.
But you were greenhorns, let's face it.
Look, yes, of course, it was a matter of fact and record that we hadn't been ministers. Did that change our ability to get up and running quickly, to deal with crises that actually no amount of experience could prepare you for? I think we did a good job. That is not to say there weren't complexities in our arrangement. We were a true MMP government, but in spite of that, I still stand by our record.
Do you sincerely believe that you would have won the election so convincingly if it wasn't for COVID?
Oh, yeah. I absolutely accept that people were looking for stability. They were looking for certainty, for a continuation of what we'd done. And so it's very hard to really quantify what that meant in terms of the final outcome.
But it's obvious, isn't it? I mean, COVID certainly was a helping hand.
COVID has changed everything, so of course it had an impact on our politics and on election. I can't tell you how much of an impact.
What's the most pressing issue facing New Zealand at the moment? Is it child poverty? Is it housing, skyrocketing housing? Or is it climate change?
It's our recovery, which is all of those things, because those were
including climate change?
Absolutely. Because
well, why haven't you declared an emergency in housing and an emergency in child poverty?
In all of those areas, alongside saying, look, we've got to keep COVID out of New Zealand, we've got to start our economic recovery. Alongside that, we've said housing, child poverty and child wellbeing and climate are our three priorities that sit within that. When it comes to declarations of emergencies, they're usually spared, of course, for civil defence emergencies. I think one of the really strong points around a climate declaration is climate change contributes to all of those threats to life. The loss of housing exacerbates fires, flooding, all of the things that contribute to those civil defence emergencies. There is a link there, and that was one of the points that a climate declaration makes, and it's why many countries are doing the same.
Would it be helpful, though, in terms of poverty, for example, which you've championed that you're battling?
Yes.
Would it be helpful to say that it is an emergency and put in definite targets to do something about it?
I would agree with you on that, which is why we have the children's, the child poverty reduction legislation. For that very reason, we've got to get over the cyclical nature, the way that political cycles dictate whether we invest in that issue or not. One of the big problems, I believe, is that we have such a lag in seeing the difference that initiatives make. Yesterday we had data released that was 18 to 30 months old, that actually we need to go beyond political cycles. I spent the first term dealing with stats that were from the last government. So putting in that legislation is a way of trying to overcome that and keep a constant eye on child poverty.
Extending the bright line test. Now, it's pretty obvious that if the advice is along those lines, you'll do it. Now, you mistakenly called it capital gains tax in the House the other day because essentially if you do extend it beyond the 5 years now, that's what it is, isn't it?
Well, actually, the point that I was making in the House...
But is it a capital gains tax?
Well, the point I was making in the House is actually you'll get in the House completely different views on that. You'll see statements by Chris Bishop pointing out the reasons why it's not. You'll have people like Andrew Bailey pointing out why it's on income.
What do you see it as?
Well, of course it's not comprehensive, and the fact that we've had debates about introducing capital gains tax demonstrates that we don't already have what most people consider to be
a capital gains tax. So
no, the bright line test is designed.
It's a tax on capital.
It is specifically focused on housing, and the time-limited focus around it is about targeting speculators. So that's what it was intended to do. The point I'm also making is we actually haven't made any decision on this yet. We want to see what we find out about the impact it may or may not have had. We have to try and do things that are going to make a difference in them.
But it hasn't had one iota of difference to the skyrocketing house prices, has it?
Well, interestingly, in other jurisdictions where they have more comprehensive forms of where they have comprehensive capital gains, which obviously New Zealand does not, they are seeing increases in prices in housing as well. This is what's really interesting to me. Yes, low interest rates are making a difference, but there is something about the COVID pandemic globally that's causing people to look at security in the form of housing. And we're not alone in that. I think it is made worse by the fact that we have undersupply and a few other issues in our New Zealand market. But actually, this is happening in other places. So we need to look at why that is so that we are pulling the right levers.
How would you describe your relationship with the media, and how do you feel about criticism of you?
Oh, look, everyone gets criticism when they're in this job. It's
do you
part
take
of
it
the
on
job.
the chin?
Yeah, for the most part, I think it would be you'd be saying that you were slightly inhuman if you didn't say that. Of course you hear it and you see it, and sometimes it frustrates you, but that's just human nature. I should probably ask you what my relationship with the media is like.
Well, no, I'm asking you, how do you perceive your relationship with the media?
Actually pretty good. My view is that the media's job is to hold me to account. Absolutely. And it would be a very sad day in New Zealand politics if that wasn't what was happening. It's the public's job to have expectation of us. And by having expectation, that gives us the space to do the things that need to be done. So we all have a role to play.
Okay, finally on the diplomatic front, why is Five Eyes now assuming what could be perceived, and it has been perceived, as a diplomatic role in criticising China's actions in Hong Kong? It's a spy agent, it's a grouping of spy agencies.
I don't see it as, I see a difference in the roles there. Of course, there have been occurrences where we have made statements where we have taken a similar view on issues. And that's where I put the most recent statement on Hong Kong. But you'll see there's occasions when we don't join others. There'll be occasions when we do. We will always take an independent view. We'll look at it from New Zealand's perspective and make our own decisions.
Are you pleased to see the back end of Donald Trump?
Look, I'm pleased to build a relationship with like-minded individuals,
like
no matter
Donald
where
Trump?
they are. I don't know Donald
Do you
Trump. I've
agree
spent
with
all
what he
of-
stands for?
Oh, we have differences. Of course we have differences in
Are
opinion.
you as different as chalk and cheese?
Oh, we're very different. I think that's fair to say. We come from, different generations as well. Yeah, I think it's quite obvious that we're quite different people.
Do you
Barry.
think he's made the differentiation between Justin Trudeau's wife and yourself now?
No, I'm not getting into that conversation.